And most of the Michael Saylor stuff, to be fair, like I'm grateful for what he does for crypto in general. It does certainly border on cringe, might be a generous statement, but I think it's also a lot of stuff he says is good and useful. And I've been thinking a lot on like the proof of stake versus proof of work thing for a while. Obviously, Ethereum and Bitcoin, well, I don't know if it's obvious to people, but Ethereum and Bitcoin are both proof of work coins, and Ethereum is making the move to proof of stake next year, and it's caused this like huge.
This is a really good example of a preface. I love that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
I try to take and integrate feedback and just
Thank
always
you.
always
That
get
was
better.
remarkably fast. Yeah.
I'm a fast learner. I didn't get here being slow.
Please, Lord, continue.
So yeah, there's this like ongoing debate. I mean, we've certainly heard it a lot with Hoffman from Bankless lately. There's been a lot of content on the proof of stake, proof of work thing, and this proof of stake's better and proof of work is better. And like I think that both sides make like really good points, and none are like entirely convincing. I don't think it's really like a winner take all debate, but I think that what like the sort of Bankless Justin Drake side of the argument is missing in this is like the kind of like Michael Saylor energy meme, the Bitcoin is a battery, which I thought was really dumb, to be frank. The first time I heard it, I was like, Bitcoin's not a battery. It's just like just using all these like, well, Bitcoin harnesses money through time and space and dimensions, and it's just like it's just so.
Oh my God! Can you only speak like that?
He did that Friday after a few drinks. I like it's coming out now.
Would you have any voice in 5 minutes if you did that?
My terrible Michael Saylor impression. I'll just start busting out bad impressions. That'll be my shtick. But yeah, when he was saying that, I was like, Jesus, this guy, it's just so over the top. And then he sort of like made the point, it like brought up El Salvador, right? And they did the volcano bonds, and kind of a meme, in and of itself. And it's kind of silly in isolation, right? Because if you're really bullish on Bitcoin, you probably buy Bitcoin. If you're really bullish on El Salvador, you'd probably like buy some bonds or something like that. It's very hard to see the intersection of why one would prefer a volcano bond to either of those two options, other than like there's just a lot of money in the space, and maybe they want to just support the cause, which is sort of like a meme and a good thing in and of itself, and maybe that's where it came from. But the volcano bond like solidified like two things for me. One is that obviously when El Salvador did its thing, the IMF sort of said like, hey, don't fuck with us, or we're going to cut you off. Don't be a bad little country and defect off the off fiat. And then Bukele, or whatever his name is, was basically just like, go fuck yourself. We'll raise money via volcano bonds, and they did that. And he just kind of demonstrated this way in which like a third world country with natural resources could leverage those natural resources like purely for like its own benefit to raise capital. Because like the standard practice for most of the last century has sort of been the Confessions of an Economic Hitman model, where you have this like kind of natural wealth, and it just kind of comes in and gets exploited. First, obviously the US popularized that, but like China's been doing it like crazy recently. Come in, give you a bunch of, you got resources, right? And you can't really use them. Well, China comes in and kind of gives you this money and like extracts value from them. And then they sort of like own you, and then like, oops, you defaulted, and now China owns all of your stuff, and they own all this, right? So what Bitcoin does to kind of bring this around, that I think is really interesting, that you can't do in proof of stake is I think Bitcoin really does enable like the monetization of energy and natural resources in general in a way that's never really existed before. And I think there are so many examples of this that I've like opened my eyes to recently. And this idea that like Bitcoin is like a way to sort of like digitally store energy in a hyper efficient way. I think there actually is a lot to that. And this is like especially useful to like a third world country with resources and not a lot of like development, in a way that like Ethereum proof of stake is just not. Because to take advantage of proof of stake, you kind of need to have capital, right? You need to own Ethereum. And it is really efficient from like a network perspective, in that you don't have to issue so many tokens and dilute yourself to, secure the network. But it also does kind of isolate a lot of these kind of, more marginalized people in countries in a way, I think. And this sort of really ties into, I think, to the whole ESG debacle of the last year, where like Bitcoin's come under all this flack because it's not good for the environment. And most of the thinking on this is either just like, extraordinarily disingenuous, or just dumb or ignorant.
Short-sighted.
Short-sighted is the one.
But it's not even short-sighted, because short-sighted would imply that there's going to be this like long-term benefit that's sort of like difficult to see, and maybe like the benefits are sort of diffuse and spread out, when the reality is that like it enables that. Like I came across via the Masari crypto report, like a paper that had been written by a researcher at ARC that I hadn't seen before. And it talked about how Bitcoin could actually enable more renewable energy production. Because what people don't really understand about the power grid is like everybody has this like zero sum mentality about everything, right? It's just like fixed amount of money, and these people are taking money from these people, and like the planet has these fixed amount of resources, and if they're here, that it's just this like, but it's not really the way things work. And this is especially true in like energy. Like people think there's this like finite amount of energy and it just gets consumed for one thing and another. But the reality of the world is that like energy is a lot more complicated than that. And you can see this like really readily in something like solar, right? So the problem with solar and other renewables is that you do not have consistent demand for the power. Power like cycles up and down, the demand cycles up and down, in regular intervals throughout the day. You don't have consistent production of the power. The sun isn't out all the time. The wind isn't always blowing. And even like hydroelectric power, that's sometimes in areas where there's like seasonal rainfall and it's not there for part of the year, right? And then the other problem is that you can't really like store energy. Like our technology for storing energy is not good. Like, so what ends up happening is like you may have like an area that needs like, I don't know my power units, but like say like 100 megawatts of energy per year, right? But you can't build a wind or a solar farm that produces like 100 megawatts of energy, right? It's just not that simple. You have to sort of model it on like where peak energy is going to be, and you end up in a situation where you either overbuild, to meet peak demand, but then you have like all of this wasted production, and you end up being like really, really unprofitable. Or you build like a much smaller project that can actually have the value extracted from it. But then you have all this additional energy demand that has to go into more consistent traditional sources like coal. So what Bitcoin allows you to do is to say like, well, I can just build the solar farm for the maximum amount, right? And anytime the energy isn't being used or drawn upon by the grid, instead of trying to store it and failing, right, or just wasting it, which is basically what would happen, you can now just divert the energy to the Bitcoin network. So you can now monetize all of the downtime on your solar farm, all the downtime on your wind farm, where you're not, you can actually over-engineer these things so that you don't have like rolling brownouts in Germany and all the other places of the world where like there's no really
California.
great implementation. Yeah, like these renewable energy is like not, it is like sort of a meme to a degree, right? It's like it's nice in theory, but in practice it's not serving the needs of the people who rely on energy.
Bitcoin becomes the battery to capture the value of the energy.
Yeah,
instead of
like
capturing the energy.
what do you think the odds are that Tesla rolls out their integrated Bitcoin miner for their solar panels and battery system, right? So, obviously the solar energy can go into the battery or it could go to like offset the cost and make money. I think it's like a good little, I mean, they're really good at hardware. I think it falls right in their
I agree.
wheelhouse.
And I
It's
actually
an interesting question. Like,
I
I'm
think Elon
really
mentioned that
skeptical.
he was gonna turn a mining rig into like a space heater as well because it like emits
Yeah.
heat. Perfect.
I mean, Elon is notorious for just promising things and not delivering them.
Oh
Here we go.
no. Oh no. Oh
Which is
god.
just factually, it's just factually true. I mean, the vast majority of features he
Literally
promises for
over
Tesla,
delivered in every possible way a human being can over deliver.
you're like, let's just point out all of the, like he exaggerated and never delivered on self-driving cars. He exaggerated, wildly exaggerated, never delivered on like self-driving trucks. Those things can't, like
It's
the whole
hard. It's hard.
Yes, it's hard. I'm not saying
progress.
he will never deliver on these things. Like, I'm
So
not
why
saying,
are we
I'm not
gonna
saying
why
this
are
is
we
specific to this
spanking
conversation
someone?
because the idea that we're going to just pop out like a Bitcoin mining thing that also charges your car the next year or two, like color me skeptical, right? And yes,
Look.
yes, we have this balance all the time with stuff we have. If when we aspire to these outlandish things, like yes, we promise things that are sometimes unpromisable, but like
What it's
I'm not
called to
talking
be a
about that.
visionary.
Yes,
he
but the
is a
question is sort of
visionary,
like,
and that's
is
what
he
makes
gonna,
him a
do you,
visionary.
the question was, do you think Tesla is going to roll out some magical Bitcoin mining equipment? And my answer to that is like, in the near term, no. Like that just sounds like classic Elon. Like,
I would take that
overhype.
bet every time. Of course, I'm with you on that. Like, if I'm just going to
Yes.
sit and go,
Okay,
like,
then-
how
then we
quickly
agree.
is that going to happen? But hold on. But what you're doing is and I don't want to get into too deep of a tangent on Elon. But what you do when you make those comments is you're drawing this like circle around anything Elon has ever said or done, and just saying that because he is not able to deliver in the timelines that he delivers in, or because he has not delivered in certain things that he said he was going to deliver, that just makes the whole thing a farce, an illusion. It makes the whole thing a con. That's where I draw the line. I say, look, visionary entrepreneur doing things that no one else has ever done.
I don't want to turn. I don't want to turn this into an
due.
Elon debate. We could go through
Okay,
a
well, then
long
let me
list
go
of
back to
things
something.
Elon has
I wanna go-
promised that are physically impossible to deliver and will never be delivered. And then there are some things that are aspirational and may be delivered someday. But I can assure
Fine.
you, the list of things that Elon has promised that have been delivered in anywhere near a timely fashion is like quite long. And that is to do nothing to discredit like Tesla in general, but like there is a lot of stuff being like overpromised and underdelivered by Elon. In addition to the great stuff he has done. Okay.
Yeah, I went to Mars before Elon. Actually,
both of these
I
thoughts
bought
at the same
GameStop,
time.
so I've already been to Mars.
Okay, well, I want to go back to energy, and we can wrap that topic if anyone else has anything on it. But look, the main thing with Bitcoin energy and that topic that's really interesting to me is like, look, the middle curve sort of like mainstream reaction to it is short-sighted, yes, but what it mainly is in from as far as like my perspective sees is lazy. It's extremely hard to go into the details of how this stuff works. It's very similar to just taking climate change and having a take on it based on what the consensus in quotes might say. And by the way, I'm not trying to put myself in any position on having a position with climate change. I don't know enough about it. I can't answer that question because I don't understand what it looks like to recreate climate change science in a vacuum, because I know that's not possible. So the instances where there is science that leads to certain conclusions, to the best of our ability, I understand why there might be a consensus that overwhelmingly points to one direction. So with Bitcoin, the best example that I've come across of someone who isn't, having a middle curve reaction is Jordan Peterson. So there was this video I came across on my YouTube algorithm. Jordan Peterson's reaction to getting orange pilled and just generally understanding, I can't even say understanding. And the reason that I say I can't understand climate change or Bitcoin mining and its relationship with energy is because Jordan Peterson can't understand it. His reaction was, I need, and I quote, I'm paraphrasing, but I quote very, like almost to the T, I need the next 5 years to think about this. was his reaction. So the level of depth of understanding of what is possible for developing nations, for what this does to energy and the ability to move that energy from one area to another, how we store it, all of that, for the first time that I've ever seen, blew his mind. I don't think I've ever seen Jordan Peterson's mind get blown at a new topic. He typically blows his own mind with his own ideas because he's discovering what he knows in real time.
But he
And
just
so to
learned
me,
about
that
Bitcoin
showed me
recently,
everything.
yeah?
He didn't learn about Bitcoin recently, but there was a discussion
Like
around.
Recently.
Yeah,
He like crossed
yeah, it was
crossed a
deeper.
particular Rubicon recently, and
Yeah.
he's had like an aha moment.
Do we know his like has he commented on financial markets before? Like does he have like a proclivity to one camp or the other? Any like
not
biases that we know? I'm just curious.
Financial market. Well, he's
Great
obviously more in. I hate to put him in like the conservative bucket, but he clearly like caucuses with the right. But like Bitcoin is like a really natural fit for him because his whole brand is sort of built on like self-reliance, right? And personal responsibility. And these are like kind of core elements of like Bitcoin culture. You know,
Sovereign
not your
individual.
keys, not your Bitcoin, self-sovereignty, you know, self-custody, like all this stuff. It does fit in that realm. And in that respect, it's not even like political to him
I
so
love
much
that
as
about
it is
Bitcoin.
just like a fit. And that's what I mean. Bitcoin's great. Bitcoin should appeal to the left and the right. It's like a shame that it's sort of turning into a political football now, just because one side has started the right is starting to embrace it more. So the left is starting to sort of naturally backlash against it a little bit, with almost not even understanding why they're doing it, or like politicians are doing it because it's like obviously expedient, but then people are sort of going along with it because they're obviously like, oh, lefty person likes that, I have to hate that, or a righty person likes that, I have to hate that. And that's like a shame because like, you know, Bitcoin is for everybody, crypto is for everybody, but like Bitcoin is like for everybody. It's like one of the more like equalizing forces
I'm
that's
really
ever been put into the world, you know?
interested in the sequence of the narratives that are going to happen. Like obviously, you know, Ethereum's going to go proof of stake, say early next year, and they're going to use the narrative of like, you know, manages less energy, so Bitcoin will have that against it. Then I think there might be another narrative will come up is I think it's going to be the largest proof of work network, and that's actually really hard to rebuild, to copy, like to you know, spin up manufacturing and, you know, structure all these devices along the world, and most of them probably with sustainable energy. Like it's going to be something that's really hard to copy and will back the hard money thesis. So that narrative might come back if people can kind of, you know, wear out the anti-environment narrative. I'm sure like, you know, there'll be some news on different big, maybe public companies using renewable energy, like, I don't know, Niagara Falls or something to mine Bitcoin energy. There will be. And then at some point, I think, you know, like oil, I think the game theory plays out for these smaller countries and kind of pushed off authoritarian regimes where they may price commodities like oil in Bitcoin at some point. You know, that might be like years away, but still, I'm just curiously what the sequence of these narratives is going to be. I think over the long haul, it's all bullish for owning it, but
for owning, you know, what, Bitcoin, or for owning, well, I think like especially like we're all pretty big Ethereum bulls here, and like I would even say like I like Ethereum more than I like Bitcoin, but I like have like a deep respect for Bitcoin, and I think it's almost unfair to compare them because they are just
it
is
so stupid
different,
to,
right?
I don't think it's good.
Like as like Ethereum, like I know that this environmental thing is going to be like a narrative that Ethereans push, and like we should probably push back against it. Like we should probably be like intellectually honest about it. Like Bitcoin is it's just not bad for the environment. Like if anything, it's like an active force of good for the environment because of the way that if you rarely understand how energy works, it does incentivize more renewable energy in the world, right? And then like you also need to just look deeper and be like, okay, so Bitcoin uses 1% of the energy in the world. You're like, well, that sounds like a lot. Okay, but like how much does the dollar use? how much does the banking system use? How much of the banking system can Bitcoin replace, and what are the marginal gains of energy usage on that infrastructure? And then you can go deeper than that too. Like you can go like beyond the environment, right? This is I can't remember who brought
Hot
this point
damn.
up, so I'm not going to cite it.
That's
but like
a good take, man.
There blanket citation out there somewhere. Somebody did this write up. I wish I knew his name, but like he was talking about how what people are missing in the energy debate too is when you talk about things like the dollar, like oil, like real estate, property, all of these things are ultimately enforced by violence. They're ultimately enforced by military force and ultimately like human life, right? That's what is like for the entirety of humanity has like enforced like the dollar supremacy, has enforced like oil, has enforced property rights. Like all of these things have ultimately been backed by like violence and ergo like human life, right? So the fact that something like Bitcoin enables all of this, right? And the cost is not human life, it's just energy. Like that's another thing that people aren't thinking about. Like this thinking about like, oh, Bitcoin uses X energy. It's just so myopic. It's just so middle curve. It like really, it really hurts. And like to put this thing into perspective, it just
like hurts your brain.
Bring it. Yeah, like really does. Like once you learn about it, it's just like another one of these things where you're like, how can people like actually hold this position, like knowing what I know, and like you just hope it's just because they don't know and they will come around.
No, they don't know.
Out, right?
They don't know. Like,
but like,
yeah.
Just to put Bitcoin in perspective, when we talk about like how it can like recapture, previously wasted energy, are you familiar with like flaring with natural gas, with just where they there's there's effectively a process where they just burn it up because it can't be effectively transported anywhere and used in an economically viable sense. The amount of natural gas that is just burned every single day in the United States, not like burned, like used, like just flared, is 8 times the entire year of the Bitcoin network's like energy production, I believe.
I don't know that.
Every day.
8x.
Which is just like a mind blowing stat. That was in the report. So if that's wrong, just go yell at.
It's a good point. Like me. How much energy the dollar is creating, but what else goes behind, making a currency the reserve currency, right? Like you could say the whole like military budget,
full blown military,
yeah, exactly,
just,
right? Like
just think about like the toll, the violence, everything that's been kind of like enforced upon the world, like at large, in the name of like dollar supremacy. And like, sure, we can argue that was better than the alternatives, and I would argue that it was. But it doesn't mean that there was not like a great deal of like bloodshed and loss in the name of that. And that doesn't have to continue.
Any byproduct of like US, Saudi Arabia, like that was the original agreement. Like we're going to price oil in dollars, like the petrodollar. That agreement, is what, I think sustains the dollar, obviously other things, but it helps sustain the dollar as the reserve currency. So whatever byproduct of violence or loss of life or just like, messed up foreign relations happens from that, you could probably file that in the column of cost, right?
Mm-hmm. This is good perspective on Bitcoin. I'd like to put another sort of like maybe a boundary on the perspective of Bitcoin, because I want to ask you guys, particularly Nick and Armand, because Stephen, you actually mentioned it in episode 1, but have you guys ever sold Bitcoin? I've only held it for 2 years, so I've literally never sold it, but I don't intend to. And I think that's important, because I think that when you consider that, like that is not going to be a medium of exchange. Like right. I won't sell it. I will never sell it. Like I'm not going to sell this stuff. So like how it like, there is a boundary on, it's of course Bitcoin could be a great and maybe the best store of value of all time, but like it's not going to be money, like medium of exchange money.
Yeah. Ooh, you just really prodded an army.
Right, I know.
It's not.
I don't think that's a particularly controversial point, though.
No, it's not. But it is when you're speaking to someone who's dedicating their life to it.
I
And
think
so
even among
my
even among
reaction to that,
Bitcoiners, not, I would
my
say.
my reaction that though would to be to better understand why I'm missing something there, because I clearly am missing something there. I don't see it as a medium of exchange. So yeah, Eric, not only have I not sold it, but I've never even thought of using it in a sense. There's no utility.
I'm not going to sell it for
obviously, currently.
burgers. That's for sure. Like, I'm
Right,
not gonna,
right, right. And this is what people outside of our world, that's their favorite jab, right? Have you bought a pizza with Bitcoin? Well, I can actually tell you about somebody who did. But the point is, like, that's always the reaction. It's this has no utility. This is not a medium of exchange. What's the purpose of a digital gold and a store of value? I might as well just keep doing things the way I do them. So yeah, I don't think that's I want to better understand what it is that, like, say you guys were to put on the hat of a Bitcoin maxi, like, what is the argument that this thing should serve every purpose, and why does every layer one coin want to serve every purpose? That's
Well,
what I think we have to.
you're conflating things a little bit. Bitcoin, like, very expressly does not want to serve every purpose. They've made very conscious decision to only serve effectively like one purpose, right? So I wouldn't like lump them with other layer ones, or I wouldn't even call Bitcoin like a layer one really in the traditional sense that we say layer one, right? So I wouldn't say that. And as for like what a max, like there are no even halfway intelligent maximalists I know who are under any delusion that like Bitcoin is going to be some sort of medium of exchange anytime in the near future, right? Like I think the current thought is basically that like you have Gresham's law whereby good money drives out bad money. It's obviously like a fundamental law that like when you have good money and bad money, you hold the good money and you spend the bad money, right? Mm-hmm. So this fits like very in with like the Bitcoin thesis, right? I think the idea that it has to be a medium of exchange today or it's like invalidated is not a good argument. Like, because if you assume an asset is going to grow to $100 trillion, as like Michael Saylor thinks it is, and do 100x from there, like it's obviously not going to do 100x while maintaining stability in a way that like makes it like useful to spend. Like, so I don't think anybody believes that. So the argument from a maxi perspective, if they really wanted to hold on to the medium of exchange thing, would be that like you have to get to the point where it's sort of like hit. It's like it's leveling off point. It's like hit like the flat part of the logarithmic growth curve, and it's just sort of like moving in the same generalized direction and generalized rate that like the US dollar does today, but it can't get there until it gets like much bigger. And like I don't
what would you call it if
think
like
it even
sovereign, what would you call it if sovereign nations are like using it to exchange, using Bitcoin as an exchange of value to settle like government debt or something like that? That's kind of like exchange.
Well, I think Bitcoin is a settlement layer, and the Bitcoin network, more specifically as a settlement layer, is
Bitcoin
interesting.
to Bitcoin, you're saying like sending it back and forth?
Yeah. Just like Strike, the app is a good example of this. Strike is an app that was developed by Jack Mahler. It basically leverages Bitcoin Lightning Network to send fiat currency anywhere in the world. So you're sending fiat from your bank account to somebody else in their native currency. So you send dollars, they get pounds. It uses the Bitcoin network. Nobody ever touches Bitcoin, right? So I think the Bitcoin network today already settles like more transactions per day than Fedwire does, right? Which is in and of itself and like some people will say like, no, Fedwire does like, 2.5 times as many, but like in reality, there's like a lot of like batched transactions with the way that the Bitcoin works. And it's like, it almost like certainly like far more than Fedwire. But at any rate, the fact that it's even close is like crazy, right? That in and of itself is like a tremendous amount of utility, regardless of whether you want to take it out to Starbucks and use it to to buy a coffee. There's so much value and there's so much utility there. Like that the Starbucks thing does not invalidate the existence of Bitcoin. And, it's a very smooth brained argument, and I think that line of attack probably died with any sort of like, it hasn't really been taken seriously since like 2017, 2018.
No, I think the future
opinion.
currency will be, stable coins or central bank digital currencies, stable coins settled on Ethereum, central bank digital currencies. I don't know what they'll set up, but either way, that will be the future currency. But Bitcoin could be used as reserves for any one of those, right? Like a country could hold Bitcoin in their Federal Reserve to hard back their currency, and a stable coin could also have WBTC as part of
Just
the
like
correct. There's absolutely no reason why we can't have stable coins that people use as a medium of exchange, and they're collateralized by Bitcoin in the same way that we have DAI on Ethereum, and it's sort of collateralized by Ethereum. Like this idea that like you can't get any stability from Bitcoin, I don't think is true, because I think you can get stability fiat to fiat, but also just within crypto itself.
What does this mean to you guys as investors? Like when you think about that?
Well, I guess
different purposes, right?
I don't know, because I think like a guy like Hoffman would argue like, why can't ETH also do that, and also what it does,
Right. Which has become a very common sort of broad argument in favor of Ethereum.
They both could do things that the other do, but like I still get put off when people compare the two together, because like they're two different things, and they're also two different types of investments. Like on investments, Bitcoin is kind of like your store of value over long term, and Ethereum should be like your venture capital bet, right? It's like a 5 to 10 year technology play, and that's not what I don't view Bitcoin as. That I think it is like my primary hedge against inflation, and I consider it all to be a somewhat risky bet at the same time. But I don't know if you guys have seen this, like the Winklevoss twins, I think like 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, they put out some like why 500K Bitcoin. And I think in the thing, they put Bitcoin as digital gold and Ethereum as oil, like as comparable commodities. And so like when people argue like, well, Bitcoin isn't good enough, it's like, I don't know, they're like using something that it shouldn't be used for. Like I try to put Bitcoin and use it to like run my car and to run this like global financial or global like transportation network, and it doesn't work that way. And it's like, well, of course it doesn't. It's not what it's for. It's not what it's built for. It's not how it's going to be used. So I don't know. I think such a weird place to be when you start comparing those two. And I think maybe over time, it'll be done less, because people will realize how weird it is to compare, like gold and oil. Maybe they're in the same asset class still, but their use cases are like so wildly different.
You're bringing up something that I fundamentally actually worry about. I really think that there's serious concerns around the space as a whole, where you have this thing that is obviously moving at an exponential rate of adoption, and people are insanely excited about it. And we're obviously in a bull market right now. And as soon as people enter into this whole world that is just purely chaos and volatility, they start to develop this idea of belonging, of community, of tribes, which is super innate and natural to every single human being. And I can understand why we fall into this trap. But the whole purpose of crypto, I mean, I don't know, to me at least, was to eradicate all of that type of thinking, to just create a totally open, borderless, to remove, to get us out of these walled garden type technologies and spaces, and create openness and permissionless networks. And I just really worry about certain types of maximalism. I worry about certain types of thinking. I see the same thing that has caused problems in America and the world as a whole in crypto. And I think we're kind of like dismissive of it because it's so early, and we're like, oh, that's cute. So-and-so is having a little Twitter argument with so-and-so, and that's cute. But really, it's like fundamentally a problem. Like, we should all be helping each other. We should all be moving up together. We should realize that there are apples and oranges, and that each one serves a different purpose. Some are utility, some are whatever the fuck they want to be. Help one another. Like, I'm worried. Am I the only one?
Yeah, I kind of disagree with this take. A lot.
Disagree, but does that resonate with any of you? Like, I'd love to hear your take, Stephen, on why you disagree. But hold on.
What you're describing is like the free market, and I think like everyone just like that's what the market does. It like has individual actors, and everyone arrives at their the final place.
I don't mind the like a community building and the building of a tribe. What really bothers me is like the type of thinking that reminds me of religion, where it's like we have one thinking, and anytime an argument plays out, we're just like, we're not going to acknowledge it for if it's credible or not. We're just going to like put it off. Is it in our line of thinking? And you could see that with like the Elon Musk thing. Like, one, he's on our side, and then instantly he's not on our side.
Yes.
And I bet you're going to see the same goddamn thing with El Salvador, right? El Salvador is on our side right now. And then I'm sure there's going to be a downside to having a, semi-dictator in like a third world country where people are still getting poorer, like as your main proponent for why Bitcoin, like that, there's going to be a downside to that. And
buying from his phone, by the way, buying off of his phone.
Yeah, I was like, and just like, the whole, anyway. But so I
do want to fine tune. Yeah. I do want to fine tune that and just state, love seeing the free market play out. Absolutely, Eric. I absolutely love that. And community building and tribes are innate human being behavior. What I'm saying is, like, can we have a new metaverse? And within that metaverse, can we at least evolve our thinking a little bit where we're inclusive of these religions? They're ultimately religions. There's dogma and tribes being formed. And what I would like to see is a little bit more of a permissionless open network between these different religions. It'll allow for people to move from one to another. And if we're going to put Elon Musk on a pedestal and say, God, he's our savior for our coin, and the moment that he tweets out anything about Doge, we're going to rip him apart. Like, that's funny to me. It's like, come on, man. Like, he's just a human being. He's an investor. And I know I'm hitting a sensitive spot for Stephen with that example. But remove the Elon from the point, and that's the point, right?
Yeah. Religion has caused more wars and more death probably than any other thing over like human history. So I really hope we don't like adopt that same kind of dogma in these different communities. I think this group's fairly politically in the middle, and so I think we'll probably be down the middle when it comes to which crypto dogma or family you're going to ascribe to, right? It seems so silly and dumb.
Would you say that that's also a role that Collective Shift is going to play, is to like try to facilitate open conversations about these types of things?
Oh, I really hope so. Or at least to be as objective and unbiased as possible. Yeah. I mean, the idea here is to help people understand the space and then to make money. Like, so right. Where the alpha flows, people will go. And ultimately,
I was actually thinking about that this like today earlier. I was thinking like I'm such like an ETH guy now. I even have like the ultrasound money thing on my Twitter. But like, but I just thought about it. Like, I'm much more like Suzu-ish in that if I stopped making money on ETH, I'd be over it. I'd be way over it. I'd be over ETH if negative investment returns for too long, I'm over it.
Appreciate your honesty.
So you're an avalanche, man. That's what you're telling me.
Yeah. I think we all are. I mean, that's why we do this, isn't it? Like, we do this to make money, right?
Agreed.
It's like both for me. I obviously want to make money. I'm primarily driven by making money, like, if I'm being honest, but like I do believe in it all, and it does feel good to be a part of like meaningful things and to like be building, or at least participating in like the new world,
Decentralization matters. I'll say that.
There will be like, the world will be a better place. I think, we'll probably go peak decentralization, decentralize too much. And then there'll be like, a proper use of decentralization for some things where, and none for others. But yeah, I think in general, it provides like a better place, especially for people to kind of move between financial classes, right? Like for more upward mobility, which is pretty sweet.
Well, the beauty of centralization that's really interesting is centralization created every single thing that we see today. Innovation was mostly driven by
Wait,
centralized thinking.
Not in the United States.
What? I disagree
Why
with
not?
that.
Why not?
Every
Web 2 company that you're looking at.
But one of the, I don't think you're zoomed out enough. Like one of the central innovation, no pun intended, one of the central innovations of like the last couple hundred years has been like the evolution of like free market capitalism versus like centralized, control, right? Which in and of itself is decentralized. In the same way that like cryptos is that like you can make the same analogy by saying that like, oh, like crypto is great because it's centralized into these centralized teams that build protocols instead of a bunch of random people running around coding. So it just depends on like what layer you're kind of zoomed into, but like like the free market as a whole is like pretty damn decentralized, especially like when compared to like Soviet communism. That's what makes it good, is like all of these individual actors, although some of them may be groups that within that group, yeah, sure, they're centralized.
Sure, you're getting really detailed there, but I'm referring to the layer that created the innovation, which is the layer beneath the free market, which is the companies that were centralized.
I don't know. Most of science throughout history has been very collaborative, and spread across. Sorry, I'm devil's advocating the
No. That's a fair point.
Like a lot of that innovation has been very collaborative across countries, across.
I think a lot of our Wednesdays have actually like kind of been around this idea of like what is like the appropriate level of centralization versus decentralization. I think like it's becoming more clear to me that like like how Ethereum is like the protocol level that allows other apps to be developed. I think it's kind of like how I think about the free market, and then you can like bring on companies to innovate or something, like.
Is it that complicated? I mean, it's probably a little complicated, but like it just seems obvious that like decentralization works the best when you go out and you zoom to like large groups, and that centralization works the best when you zoom into small family units, right? Like you don't want a decentralized household with like 11 children in it.
Kids are running
you want the dad to just be like a benevolent dictator, right?
Right.
But you don't want like a dictator running the earth full of 7 billion people, right? And you don't want a market with like one company. So it's
good analogy. Yeah, very fair.
Can you imagine guys like to how silly it was like in like Soviet Russia? Like there's like central planners, and they'd be like, all right, how many barbers are we going to need next quarter? And then like, okay,
guy just here's how many barbers. All the
here's how many blue jeans we're going to need.
This train of wheat is going to go to here, and then we're going to. Yeah, it was like insane. It was absolutely insane.
You must have known the whole time, like we are fucking this up so bad. Like this is definitely wrong. Like it's wrong. Of course
they did, but they didn't want to get shot. You just keep your head down and you ship the trains out to St. Petersburg.
I mean, I think like it's a good topic of discussion for DAOs too, right? Like everyone's like slapping a DAO on it, and it's like, well, we've talked about some initiatives we would want to like embark on. Like, well, do you make it a DAO? It's like, well, do you want to make it super inefficient, take 5 times as long, and be average and mediocre? Then yeah, we should. But if you want to do it faster and more efficiently,
like the flex tape meme.
Yeah, just slap it on DAO. I mean, with the DAO, you can certainly issue a governance token, which could have like an extreme valuation. So maybe during a bull market, it kind of makes financial sense to slap a DAO on it. But certainly to execute, sounds like a horrible way.
But it seems like the market is moving towards this like evolutionary model, right? Where a lot of those great projects now are that they're starting centralized and at like a particular critical mass, you're like moving to more decentralized. And
your framework works, right? Like if it gets big enough, then yeah, maybe we decentralize it and like make this like public good, this company that everyone likes and uses. Like let's put it in the hand of the users in the community and let them kind of like see it from here on for the next like 200, 300 years, where the
I think
founders.
we're
Kind of
forgetting-
how government works, right? Like we have these industries, and then they get super big, and then the impulse has been to like collectivize them and turn them into utilities and stuff. So maybe it's not, maybe it's not so different.
We're gonna say, Armand.
I just think it naturally happens. Like it's just something that is sort of inevitable in the evolutionary cycle of whatever we are talking about. If we're going to get really macro about it and look at the levels here, like this, it makes me think about Kevin Kelly in so many ways. Like, just because I've had these conversations with him, it helps me zoom out and look at some of the things that humans build, the tools that we build, they build us, the technologies that we build, being this layer that is not separate to us as a species. And like, there should be fundamentally no difference between the evolutionary cycles that we go through and technology in and of itself. And like, not to get overly philosophical, which I would love to if you guys want to, but I think that it's really interesting to watch these things play out the way that they do, because it's like, was this something existential or random and humans just sort of built it accidentally, or was this something that was actually always happening anyway and was in the background and inevitable? It really makes you think about where we're going as a species and how this is going to ultimately play out. And I mean,
What are you referring to specifically? Just like crypto?
Well, I can give a good example, Armand. Crypto always existed. It was math. Like math has always existed, and it's always been going on. And we kind of like humans made, maybe made cryptography and made this like cryptocurrency industry. But like the fundamental, like if you kind of like that, math is one of those fundamental principles that's always kind of like underlined our world, and even like not even our world, like the universe. And so I don't know, I find what you said like pretty compelling, and like I just thought of it as like, maybe crypto has always been around and we took the math and added a layer on it, but math's always been there. Is that where you were thinking of when you were talking with him? Like, have these things existed?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's like we have to turn our attention to them and we have to develop them, but they were ultimately always there. And it's our ability to actually build on top of them or around them that turns them into something tangible and physical in reality. But like, to your point, like math is what ties the entire universe together, right? I mean, you're talking about like cryptography is a really fascinating, interesting topic in and of itself that most people in the crypto space, I mean, I for one have not spent enough time there, but I want to really like understand all of this from a first principles perspective. I think it's really important for people, even for an investor.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's true that math has sort of always been around, but like the cryptography that like enables Bitcoin, right? Like obviously hasn't. Just depends on like how metaphysical you want to get, right? It's sort of analogous to being like, we had the atoms here all along to create nuclear fission. We just had to like harness those atoms, It's like, yeah, it's technically true.
Yeah.
but how useful is that as an analogy? I don't know. But like, yeah, like iteration is important. Obviously, it's like every little building block. You never know which one of those is going to become like the keystone for like the next great thing. Like, there's probably like one evolution in cryptography where it was like, okay, now all the pieces are here, and then Satoshi came and kind of put that together and designed the algorithm. But he couldn't have designed Bitcoin in like 1850 with like existing math,
Yeah. The cryptography
he maybe could have
part,
designed it in like 1985. I don't know.
That sounds like, I also want to learn more about it, but it also sounds like a 10-year journey on its own, like the zero knowledge proofs or whatever. Like, that sounds like a whole different path to go down. Like, you need specific knowledge on top of specific knowledge to even learn that specific knowledge.
Yeah, and I don't think any of us need to bother with that in the same way that we don't bother with like, how does our iPad work? It's like, I don't know. At a certain point, like technology just becomes so complicated. It's like not realistic to even understand it unless you're like this sounds like such a cop out, but like I don't think Ethereum's in that state today, but like it might be in that state like really quickly.
I don't know why this reminds me, but there were three sort of like takes and it sounds like, Stephen, you read some or most of the Messari Theses 2020, to report. There were sort of like three takes for where we're at and like where it's going to go from here. And I don't remember them perfectly, but I think one is like this super cycle. The other is like this last sort of into next year, mid sort of next year. And the other is that like we're here. It's the end of the cycle. I'm curious where you guys think we're at, and like in general, like as an investor, like how, I guess if you knew how to play it, you would just play it and you wouldn't even worry about it. But like how the public in general is like looking at this and how we individually are looking at this.
I can go first if you want.
Yeah, do
By all means, by all means.
I mean, my personal take on this is, and this has been my main thesis since like, middle of last summer on the basis of all the research that I didn't personally
We're finally
do, but read and
recording
aggregated.
all of your takes,
Yeah.
by the way. So we'll be able to refer to them by time, date, the whole shebang. Like it'll all be on the record. Yeah.
Memorialize them on the wall.
Yeah, so I don't know if I can take credit
All right,
for
first
creating
take.
any of these models from scratch, but maybe I'll take credit for aggregating them. I don't know. It's always seemed pretty obvious to me from all the available data, like once you're presented with it, that we are in a cycle that's going to be much longer than the previous ones, if not so long that we can't even distinguish it as like a cycle in ways that we have in the past. And I think there's obviously like a tremendous amount of recency bias. It's like there's been like 2 cycles prior to this basically, and it's just like, yeah, it is kind of ridiculous that everybody's put together all these models on the basis of a 4-year cycle, and like arguably we've only had 1 4-year cycle, and like how you define a cycle is a little, especially in like 2013 where you had like the quote unquote double bubble. Was that 2 cycles? I don't know. It's all very fuzzy, and you can kind of see whatever you want to see in the magic mirror. But everybody who is calling for like 300K, like people are still calling for 300K Bitcoin at like the beginning of November by the end of the year. That's just like peak delusion. I think if anybody ever wants a reality check on prices, they should probably just open up like the options chain, just pull up like Deribit and see what like, December Ethereum calls are trading at, right? And like, cause I think, a couple of weeks ago, you could have bought like a $6,000 December Ethereum call December 31st for like $150 premium, right? And there were a whole bunch of people calling for 13K Ethereum by the end of December. Well, it's like, all right, we'll buy that option and make like 200x on your money, I guess, right? I think that money is probably by default a lot smarter than all the YouTubers and people tweeting stuff, right? And clearly that is not pricing in like, not to say that they were right before, because those models were wrong before, but like I think those models are a lot smarter now than they used to be, and they're more, intelligent players in the space making those markets.
Is the crypto market like options? I guess the crypto options market is that liquid enough? Is that, I mean,
it is on Deribit. There's pretty good liquidity there.
There is.
There's not the great liquidity. I mean, there's starting to be good liquidity like actually on chain now, but that was like a very difficult problem to solve for a long time. I mean, you have like Premia is a good.
The bid-ask spreads are really wide, and you don't get like, you can have
Deribit's not that wide. They're really bad on like Ledger X or whatever it is because there's no liquidity.
And like, anything on chain is like really wide. I mean, it's not, liquidity is not that good. I don't think implied volatility is priced correctly either, because like I get bigger premiums selling like Tesla options than I do on crypto, and that shouldn't be the case.
Yeah, it seems right. Doesn't seem right?
Tesla might have more Tesla probably has way more volatility than Bitcoin this year. Like way more, I would bet, like multiples higher.
I don't think so, man. I think, didn't Bitcoin go down by like 55% this year? Like
I would place a strong wager on that if you wanna.
But it's not even Tesla. Like I literally do all stocks, and my screener will come up, like it came up with 1,200 stocks today. Tesla, in the chain was probably like 10 of those. So there's a ton of stocks with volatility that's like being priced higher than crypto volatility, and that doesn't seem right to me.
I think there are a lot of
leave
stocks
Tesla
that have
aside.
higher volatility, though. I think that like large sectors of the stock market actually have had higher volatility, especially than Bitcoin this year.
Maybe
Feel
so.
free to fact check me on that, but I'm fairly certain that's true. But yeah, I guess to
I
tie
wouldn't
that
mind
into
seeing
what
a
you
wager
were
here.
saying before, Armand, like yeah, like all the data I've looked at suggests that like we're going to have like a very long cycle, if not like a super cycle. But
Perpetual
like,
one?
but super cycle to me is like, what does that even mean? Like if we just draw down 60% and have like 3 month bear markets and then
Right.
go back up, is that a super? I guess technically, but like you
Yeah.
still can get wrecked quite bad.
Hold on.
in there,
Didn't ETH
you
go
know?
from like 80 to 5,000 and then back down to 1,700? There's no
I mean,
way
Yeah.
this
stocks
year
are
it's
higher volatility than that.
I said this year.
Maybe like year to date, because like in the last 12 months, it was at like $100. Like, of course,
No,
crypto is much higher
no.
volatility.
Ethereum was like $700 a year
More
ago, I
like,
think.
yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So, and I didn't say all stocks. I said there are many stocks that have higher.
I still
volatility.
think crypto is just
I
way
want to look
more
it up.
volatile.
Jamie,
It's
look
not
that
even
up.
close.
Look, we're we need to be specific about what we're arguing. If we're arguing specific stocks versus Bitcoin, then there are many stocks, like Tesla, especially, I think, which has probably had higher
GameStop or
volatility
something.
than Bitcoin. Yeah, certainly GameStop, right? So it's sort of like we can just
Yeah,
pick
look,
your poison there. But as
Ethereum
far-
was at 573 a year ago.
Exactly. 10x.
What was it at the start of the year though? 780.
Start of the year, January 1st,
Memory's so fuzzy now.
774.
Wow, nailed it.
But a big jump. It went from like the 730 all the way up to 1,000.
What was your first
within
or lowest ETH buy?
My
Oh,
lowest
God.
ETH buy?
Lowest.
I bought like a chump, but
Probably
like
like
a chump
230, 220. I think I got a lot. I got almost all of my ETH in that range. I also bought a lot of ETH at about $1,400 in 2018, which is like the Pico top.
Top
so
tick.
yeah.
Nice.
So I mean, to be fair, I immediately flipped it into like a seed investment, which may or may not make multiples on that. So it remains to be seen like how dumb I am, but I certainly have my moments.